Please be seated. So I hate to start it this way because you might not have been here last week, but I'm sure glad, Dave, I'm not preaching on Amos today. Check the YouTube video. But yeah, cranky first reading, and Psalm, cranky. But I'm not looking at those today, so I don't know. Anyway, I don't know about you, but whenever I read a story in the Bible with siblings in it, I brace myself a little bit because we all know how that usually goes. At least those of us who have been blessed with siblings anyway. Why is it that siblings can push our buttons like no one else? I suspect it's because they had a major hand in installing those buttons in the first place, right? I remember watching our own children we tried to raise with care and compassion and love and all that stuff. Children who found any and all reason to object strenuously to the very existence of the other. Some of the famous lines in our home were, "Look, he's sharing it all away from me," or "she's looking out my window," or the granddaddy of them all, "he's breathing my air." It actually happened. This kind of rivalry, though, is as old as Genesis. Cain and Abel, remember them? They both bring offerings to God, and when God picks Abel's, Cain gets jealous, so jealous that he ends up inventing fratricide. Not a great start for things, right? And then there's Jacob and Esau. Esau, the older one, who's strong and hairy and outdoorsy, and Jacob, who's younger, cleverer, and, slightly shady, if I'm honest. Only Jacob, in all the world, only Jacob knew Esau well enough, as siblings do, to know that he would be so hungry after a long day out hunting that he would gladly trade his birthright for a bowl of stew. And only Jacob was calculating enough, as siblings can be, to complete that transaction. Years later, after some divine wrestling and character growth, they hug it out, but not before a whole bunch of family dysfunction happens in the meantime. And only a sibling knows that when you ask for and you get your inheritance early, well, you're going to run through that in no time flat, because everybody knows that you run through money like a hot knife through butter. And if you think for just 1 minute that you're going to slink back here later and cozy up to Dad again and take what's mine, you've got another think coming. So when we arrive at Martha and Mary, I can't help but smile. Because sisters, take it from one who is one and has had several of them, sisters can be the best and the worst. In our gospel from Luke, we find ourselves in the home of two sisters, Martha and Mary. At least we finally get to see some siblings that have some rivalry, obviously, but the rivalry does not end up in exile or homicide. It's just passive-aggressive kitchen, complaints. Jesus has come for dinner, and everything is going, well, exactly how you might think it would go when you're hosting the Son of God for dinner. Someone's running around anxious, and someone's calmly sitting in the middle of the chaos. Classic sibling behavior. Luke tells us that Jesus has come to visit, and Martha welcomes him into her home. That alone is no small thing. In first century culture, offering hospitality wasn't just good manners, it was a sacred duty. She's doing everything that she has been taught and believes to be right. There's dishes clanging and pots bubbling and the table's getting set, and Martha is working hard because that is what you do for people that you love, especially for people like Jesus. Meanwhile, her sister Mary is sitting out there, listening, not helping, not chopping any onions or stirring any hummus, not fetching more water, just sitting and soaking up Jesus' words, because, like he's the only thing in the room. Because that is what you do with people that you worship, especially people like Jesus. Now, be honest, how many of you out there identify with Martha? We know who we are, right? We are the doers. We are the list makers. We are the people who can't sit still during a meeting because the coffee just still needs to be brewing and the tables still need to be cleaned, and who's going to be doing all that work? And how many of you identify with Mary? The listeners, the dwellers, the abiders, the ones who seem totally at peace when the rest of us are losing our minds and killing ourselves. Thank you very much. Honestly, that is how the story has always been told, as two sisters, two ways of being, one good and one bad. And then we all sit around and we try to figure out how we Marthas can become more like Mary. And better yet, because it's just more fun, we also look around us to try to figure out how others have missed the point and should become more like Mary too. The simple truth is, we need both kinds of people in the world and in the church. But the story challenges us to ask what really matters most, especially when God is in the room. Here's a quick example of how we try very hard to let both Martha and Mary into our home when we can. When we have company for dinner, I typically go into full-on Martha mode. I got to plan the perfect meal. I got to shop for the best ingredients. I've got to pair all the flavors so that they complement each other. And everything has to be just so, and it's a bit of a madhouse. And honestly, there are times, many times, most of the time, when I call out, am I the only one doing all of this? Why am I doing all this work? Even though Kevin is busy doing a lot of work on his own, but yeah. But once the guests arrive, the rule at our house is that our inner Marys need to take over. We love nothing better than lingering at table and talking well into the night about important matters of the heart. Leftovers? They'll survive. Nobody's going to die from eating mashed potatoes that got a little warm. Dirty dishes? They'll wait. Not to worry. Tomorrow's another day. More than once, a guest, or more often, and kind of ironically, one of my sisters will jump up and try to start clearing the table and just rinsing the dishes. I'm just rinsing them. Nope, not allowed. Sit back down. Be still. Be present. Listen. There is only one thing right now, and it is not the dishes. Back to our story, Martha, who hasn't learned that lesson yet, can't take it anymore. She storms in, and I picture her brandishing a wooden spoon at the same time. And she says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all this work by myself? Tell her to help me. It's such a human moment. She's not just frustrated with Mary, she's frustrated with Jesus. He sees her sweating it out in the kitchen, and he hasn't said a word about it. But then Jesus responds gently and lovingly, but firmly. Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but there is need of only one thing. This isn't a rebuke of her godly hospitality. This is a reminder about her godly priorities. Jesus doesn't say, Martha, stop caring. He says, Martha, stop being distracted by all the things that don't matter as much as this moment right here matters. And that is the nut of it for us as well. It's so easy to be distracted by all the busyness of life that we miss the one thing. I want to pause here because I think it speaks directly to our season in our church, our season here at St. James of discernment. We're about to enter into that. And we're asking, what does God want us to do with our building, with our gifts, with our presence here in this neighborhood? These are good and important and faithful questions, but they're also questions that can turn us into Marthas real fast. We start thinking about the roof and the furnaces and the budget and the bylaws and the parking lot and potlucks, and we get anxious and we get distracted and we jump immediately to solution seeking and we make task lists longer than the Beatitudes. But it's in the moments like these that Jesus gently calls us back and says, you are distracted by many things, but only one thing is needed. Only one thing. And what is that one thing? Well, it's listening to Jesus. It's sitting at his feet. It's dwelling in his presence. It's letting relationship, not anxiety, drive decisions. Here's the deeper beauty of this passage. Jesus doesn't just value relationship. He is the incarnation of relationship. Think about that. The whole Christian faith is built on one mind-blowing idea that God didn't stay far off. God came close. God didn't send down instructions from heaven like a divine Amazon delivery. Instead, he took on flesh, and then he came to dinner. Jesus doesn't just preach love. He practices it at the table, on the road, with friends, even with people that kind of annoy him a little bit. So when Mary sits at his feet, she's not just being spiritual. She's honoring the heart of the gospel, Emmanuel, God with us. Now let's be clear, this isn't just a personal story about two sisters squabbling. This is a human story. Because in every family, in every organization, even in every church, we've got Marthas and we've got Marys. And guess what? We need them both. We need to be Marthas so that we organize meals and pay bills and keep the lights on and print the bulletins. But if we only ever do those things and never pause to listen to Jesus and to each other and to the Spirit's nudging, then we'll miss the very reason that we're doing all those things that we're so busy with. Someone said, and somebody said it was the Pope at one point, but I can't verify this, so I'm just going to say author unknown, but I love this quote. Be careful of spending all your time doing the work of the Lord and forgetting the Lord of the work. Oh, yes, St. James. We must always keep the Lord of the work in our hearts and in our minds. That is the one thing. I like to imagine that after this moment with Martha and Mary and Jesus, well, actually it's just Jesus and Martha, right? After that moment, I hope things shifted a bit. Maybe she finally sat down. She put down her wooden spoon and she sat down. Or maybe Mary eventually helped with the chores. Or maybe the next time Jesus visited, they tag teamed it. You know, one in the kitchen, one listening, and then switching back and forth. Or heck, maybe, here's a mind blower, everyone pitched in, even the men, so that everyone could sit and listen and no one was stuck in the kitchen far away. Because the goal isn't to stop doing. It's to make sure our doing flows from our being with Jesus. In this world that rewards busyness so much, Jesus invites us to be still. In a culture that values doing more, Jesus values being present. In a church that's trying to figure out its future, Jesus says, start by sitting at my feet. The rest will come. So let's be a church that listens before we leap. That prays before it plans, that values presence over performance. Let's choose that one thing Not because the other parts don't matter, but because we know where our work begins, with Christ at the center. That's the one thing needed. And my friends, it will not be taken away from us. Amen.